right? And you're talking one-on-one with 10 clients that you know that you can help solve the problem. So I think that's why it's so important to niche down, because you don't need thousands of customers.
You are listening to Amplify Your Success Podcast, episode 256. And today, let's bust the myths about niching down and discover how it's the perfect way to accelerate your sales. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success Podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and business leaders. It's your host, Melanie Benson, Authority Amplifier. Today is a special episode. I've got in the spotlight my VIP client, Paul Higgins, and he's joining me to talk about one of his specialty areas, niching down to accelerate sales. But it's a unique conversation today because we talk about how I put him through a process to help him uncover his unique niche and, get out of his blind spot a little bit. And it's a really, really interesting, intriguing, and up-leveling conversation that I know you're going to get massive value out of. Now, niching down is a part of understanding who your ideal client really is. And Paul and I are going to talk about how he really had to dig deeper to take away some of the distractions and some of the myths that he'd fallen prey to before we started working together and double down to really uncover his niche. It's a really powerful process, and I cannot wait to share it with you. I would highly suggest you head over right now to my authorityamplifiers.com. This is my downloadable roadmap with all 8 steps required to amplify your reach, amplify your sales, and become the highly paid authority in your market. And I've included a training for a limited time that will help you figure out how to pull all these pieces together. And if you're curious about coaching, what that might look like together. Now, head over to authorityamplifiers.com, get the free download. And now let's get into today's episode. Well, welcome back, Amplifiers. I'm so excited. I have a delightful guest today. It's very special, and I'll explain why in a minute. But let me introduce you to my friend, Paul Higgins. We're going to be talking about how to niche down to accelerate your sales. Now, Paul is a sales strategist, a lead generator. He's host of Accelerate Sales Podcast. He's an author, and he's a business growth strategist for consultants and SaaS partners. Paul has 28 years of experience in sales and marketing, finishing up an 18-year gig at Coca-Cola, driving their marketing strategy for a $700 million plus business unit. In 2001, he left to manage his inherited kidney condition and had a successful transplant in February 2019. He's even got the pictures to prove he was working while he was getting his treatments. With his newfound energy, Paul loves to run his business, spend time with his family, and give back, which is what makes you such an extraordinary person, Paul. Thanks so much for joining me today, all the way from Australia.
Yeah, great to be here, Melanie, and thanks for the lovely introduction.
You're so welcome. And full disclosure, Paul and I have been doing some work together, just like expanding and amplifying the reach of his work in the world. So we're going to be sharing a little bit about that throughout this conversation today, because our topic is exactly very perfectly aligned with some of the work that we did together. So it's kind of a great full circle, right, Paul?
Yeah, definitely.
So a little sip of tea here for my afternoon, and let's just roll right into this concept of niching. And I'm going to start, I just want to kind of lay this groundwork for a minute, because I have had people who, when I suggest niching, they just completely resist. They're like, no way, I can help so many people. Why would I limit myself? So Paul, in the experience that you've had up to now, like, why do you think it's helpful for an entrepreneur or even like a bigger business to really niche?
Yeah, well, I'll always remember working at Coca-Cola, and the Coca-Cola brand managers, would stand up there, and all they ever talked about was the brand Coke, and they were so involved in it, right? And then once this Fanta guy got up, now remember Fanta was about 5% of the total portfolio, right? So very small mix, and he said, look, of the whole, everything you're going to remember here, you're not going to remember much about me, right? Because ultimately you're focused on selling lots of Coke. So he said, I'm just a speck in your day. But he said, stop for a minute and just think about soft drinks. And soft drinks is a speck in the consumer's day, right? So we get so involved in ourselves that we forget the fact that other people, our consumers, have got busy lives, right? And they just don't sit there and think about soft drink every day. And to me, that story's always stuck with me, because we do the same thing in our businesses, right? We're so engrossed in what we do, we forget to realize that other people have got very busy lives, right? So you think when an expert reaches out to help you, right, it's just, yes, it may be very important at that particular time, but you got lots of other things happening. You've got COVID, you've got, you name it. So to me, I think if someone can hit your LinkedIn profile and they can say, okay, you've just saved me a lot of time by saying, do you work for someone like me? And do you solve the problems that I've got? And that speck in that day, or that little moment where they come onto your profile and they know that you're exactly for them, I think that's how you get traction, versus making it so hard for someone and saying, like with Coke, hey, we sell Coke to everyone. Everyone drinks Coke, right? The ads were always very specific to their ideal target market. So even Coke had a very tight target market, but it didn't mean that everyone else couldn't drink the product. So to me, niching or niching, I think, is one of the most powerful things you can do. So you can make it easy for people that you love to work with.
Mm. And you just hit the key statement that I love to hear. We make it easy. And I think part of it is we're making it easy for people to say, yes, they know who I am. They're going to get my business. They're going to get my unique situation in the world, and they're going to be able to help me. So what is it like? Let's just clarify even more. Like, what does it mean to pick a niche? Are we limiting ourselves, or, like, how do we know we've really niched properly? I guess is the question I want to ask you.
Yeah, well, the first thing is, an Amplify Your Authority is about being an authority in a particular area, right? So it depends what business, but, most of us are coaches, consultants, service-based business owners, right? And ultimately, we don't need lots of clients, right? We all, yes, people talk about complicated funnels, and, you'll listen to a lot of marketing, but ultimately, for some of us, we might only need, working one-on-one, you might only need 10 clients at a time to meet your revenue objectives, right? So you don't need to, I always use the stadium analogy, right? You effectively aren't going to the masses in the crowd saying, hey, pick me. You're standing in the middle of the oval saying, pick me, right? Versus you're in a super box, right? And you're talking one-on-one with 10 clients that that you can help solve the problem. So I think that's why it's so important to niche down, because you don't need thousands of customers. If you're a SaaS platform, if you're a marketing agency, that's maybe then therefore you need lots and lots of a really large audience, right? And then you do a numbers game. But if you're an authority, you don't need that. People are seeking you, and the people are seeking you are coming to you for a specific reason. That's what you taught me anyway, Melanie.
Full circle moment. Well, let's talk about some of the work we were doing with you, because I think it's such a great, and I recently niched down too, I just be completely transparent here. Like, we have gone through different phases of niching down, niching up, niching down. And so recently in the last 2 years, we really started niching down again. And our niche is working with people who build a business around their expertise and they're ready to scale. So it's not just like I'm a brand new person who has never had a business and now I'm going to launch my coaching business. It's they are ready to scale. And I distinguish that because I realized that not everybody building a business around their expertise is ready for what I teach and where I excel, where my superpowers can help people. So that's a little bit about my own niching down. But Paul, like maybe share a little bit about what that experience was like for you, and what did you learn about where your superpowers are that helped you niche down?
Yeah. So when I first came to you, I was looking to help coaches and consultants. And by definition, I've already split my audience, coaches and consultants. I'm sort of taking a bet on both sides. And then it's like, well, of coaches, what sort of coaches? Is it a business coach? Is it a life coach? Like, it's such a, yes, in a way it's coming down in the market, but really it's still such a broad term. And to me, I found it hard when someone came to my profile to really talk about specific pain points and in particular specific solutions, because it was too broad, right? And that's what you and I talked about, because there's lots of coaches and consultants and not all are all equal. So, working with you, I sort of went through, well, which type of consultants do I really want to work with? Because I realize that coaches are great, but most of them can't scale their business, right? And if you're a coach, that's not being disrespectful, because you've made that choice, right? You've made the choice that unless you're going to run a coaching business, mostly it's about you, and you can scale with online courses and memberships. So there are ways, but you're doing it because you love it in most cases. Whereas consultants is a little different, where you can have people working for you and you can scale it. So I think we got to the point of, okay, consultants. And then it was like, well, what sort of consultants do you love to work with? And I think that's where, sometimes you forget your background or the benefits you've got. So I built with a business partner, we built up a tech consulting business, which was effectively a cloud partner. So we sold specific software and we did consulting, right? But we built that up and sold it to a Google partner. Now, for whatever reasons, I think COVID was part of it. I don't know, but I thought it was like I left it. I'd sold it, so therefore I'd left the industry. And it wasn't that at all. It's like something I'm passionate about, something I love to do. And that's when you said, well, actually, like, consultants is pretty broad. What about cloud partners? Like, I know Microsoft has 300,000 of them alone. There might be over 1 million of them. And is there anyone servicing that market specifically at the moment? So you've got the experience, right? You've already been there, you've done that. Who's doing that at the moment? And, you and I realize that there really isn't anyone at the moment that's owning that market. So to me, that was my version of how I went from too broad into, niching or niching down to something that I'm passionate about, I've got really good skills and experience about, and also something that I do believe I know the results or know how to get results for people.
Mm-hmm. It was such a extraordinary experience to watch you get that clarity, because there was a moment when you went, that's it. And it felt very aligned and exciting. So I might even offer to the Amplify community today, as you're listening into this, that an aha moment around you getting into the right niche is you're super excited and it just feels right. And it's not to say you won't have a little bit of that stretchy energy. It's like, really, can I do this? Is this really going to work? You might have some of those questions come up. That's natural. But I would say if it feels really off, you probably aren't there yet. Would you agree?
Yeah, and like, I was unhappy. Like, externally, I was happy to the world, but like, from a mindset perspective, it was a struggle for me, and I've never struggled. I've gone through, as you mentioned in the intro. I've gone through dialysis, a transplant. I'm very tenacious. I've always looked for the upside, but that upside was starting to cloud over. Those sunny days were starting to cloud over, and I think that's because, like, my podcast was called Build, Live, Give, right? But what does that really mean? Like, does anyone ever search Build, Live, Give? It was a great philosophy. And actually my company was called Build, Live, Give as well. So, yes, it's what I believe in, is build a great business, live a good life to give back. But does that really help solve someone's problem? Does it make it easy for them in 2 minutes to work out what it is? And that's when we went through different variations, but we ended up with Accelerate Sales podcast, which now, accelerate your sales to scale. So it's got a journey, and it's got something that people within the cloud partners would resonate more with. So I think, those changes made a massive difference. So now when I talk about, when I get on my podcast, it's a lot more specific. I can give very tangible outcomes versus something that was more a nice to have, which was build, live, give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've made yourself relevant and indispensable for your ideal clients. And I think that's a great sign you're in the right niche with two of the other factors. So let's talk about the factors of a niche down business, because there were several things that you had to shift in your business and in your business model to really be fully in alignment with this, what we might even consider like a bit of a rebrand. And you just mentioned the messaging and the branding. So your brand has to match that, and your messaging has to match that, so that your ideal clients realize how relevant you are, right? So was there anything else that in the work you're doing with clients and in the work we did, you recognize, wow, this had to change to really match this niche I'm picking for myself?
Yeah, well, I do think that, my learnings from being at Coca-Cola is that, a clear message is so important, right? So, in a meeting at Coca-Cola, if a advertising agency ever came in and they didn't put the hyphen between Coca-Cola, right, it was like, it was the end of the world. That's how much that the brand meant to them, and protecting the brand, because we were custodians of a brand that was over 150 years old, right? And I think for me, it's like every touch point that someone has with you, a potential client has with you, should be in alignment, right? So yes, you start. To me, I think the LinkedIn profile is the easiest place to start these days, because that's where most people will come into your world, is through your LinkedIn profile. But it's like every other touch point. And now I've got a whole Asana checklist of every time hopefully we don't do this again in a short period of time, but we've got everything now listed. But it's like every touch point, how do you actually have your brand well represented? And when you line all that up, you'd be amazed at how many touch points you actually have, and therefore that is quite a lot of change. And I think part of it, just quickly, is that you need to do some research as well to make sure that the change is the right thing. So go and talk to your new prospective clients to really understand it, because my experience as a cloud partner may be very different to the experience that someone else is having. So talking to people and researching that was also very important for the words that I use and the terminologies that we use as we change all of those marketing assets.
Well said. I would just, if I was going to put it into like three concise pillars to evaluate, like as you're doing your checklist. And side note, you have the most amazing checklists. Like, Paul, you are the systems guy in my mind. Like I officially give you king of systems. Because when I would see some of your systems, I was like, oh my God, those are amazing. So you are really good at the systems of businesses. But I digress. So three key things. We talked about the positioning of the brand. I would call an authority positioning, right? Like, are you positioned as an authority? And that was a big touch point for you to look at all the places, your podcast, your books, everything that you've designed to attract clients. Secondly is the message. We talked about that. Third is the offers. So one of the things that I think a lot of people forget to look at as they niche down and really like hone in a specific kind of client is, okay, so is my offer relevant and irresistible to that client? So talk a little bit about your experience with looking at an offer, like what someone is delivering to that ideal client. Where do we need to look at niching down around that?
Yeah, look, I think it's a great point. And when I work with clients one on one, it's we identify who their ideal client is, and I suppose that's part of the niching process, right?
Mhm.
So we do that, and then most importantly is understanding exactly what their problems are. And, you've all heard this to death, so I won't repeat that. But then it's like, well, how do we get offers that solve those? And how do you construct those offers? And, I had a table. Well, I have a table that I go through, which has got all the elements that you need to an offer, which I think a lot of people, don't look at it that holistically. And, we listed all of those. And then from your free, which might be a quiz, a lead magnet, etc., right through to your highest paid, what are those offers that are going to help solve those problems? And, you and I spent some good time, because for example, I had a sprint, right? So it was all about, we'll work on a 12-week sprint, but the content and the value that I added was so much more than 12 weeks. So it came to an awkward period at the end of the 12 weeks. It was like, well, most people are like, oh, well, we're done, 12 weeks is over. I'm like, but actually we've got all this other stuff to do, right? So I'd box myself into a corner, whereas you said, why don't we make it a 9-month journey, right? Make it a 3-month minimum, so that people know they're going to get the value in the first 3 months, but it's a 9-month journey, and these are the key elements. And just rephrasing that offer made a significant difference in the sales cycle, because I didn't have to go through all this pain after 3 months to then sell people into the next 6 months. It was like, no, it's a 9-month program with a 3-month minimum. So that was a very specific example that we worked through on that offer. But seeing it all on one page and all the elements, I think really helps people. And ultimately, if you don't have an offer that converts, you don't have a business.
Yeah, I totally agree. You have a hobby. It might be
correct.
fun, but if it's not making you money,
An
it's
expensive
a
hobby.
Exactly. But I was just thinking, when you're talking about the offers, I think one of the things people forget to check in with themselves too is, if you really look at the specific kind of client you want to work with, assuming you've niched down, you also have to check in and say, have I designed my offer so that it really meets the way that type of client buys and consumes, right? Because you and I went through a little bit of this with your offers. If we're targeting executives and presidents and CEOs, they have a very different way they will typically like to learn, because they are busy. And that's super different than how a coach who's maybe just starting out or who's wanting to grow their business is going to buy and consume. So knowing your niche actually dictates how you design, sell, and deliver a program.
Yeah, and once again, I think we've all got skills that we need to dust off now and again. And one of the benefits of the Coca-Cola company was the amount of consumer research they did. So they always did the research before they launched the product, right? And that's why they've been so successful. And I was involved in some of the most successful consumer good product launches in the world, and that's because they did that research up front, right? And I think often what we do is we get an intuitive, where if we do run our own businesses, the good thing is that we've got no one else to really answer to, so we can make quick decisions. That's great. But sometimes what we do is go in based off our own assumptions, and all of a sudden we've got an offer out to the world and it suits us, which is great. But is that really what your clients want? So I think doing that research component, I think, is super important. And we've got a great way of doing that through LinkedIn. So that's working very successfully, because you've now got the audience. In the old days, you'd have to go to an agency to get the audience. The audience is already there, which is great. And you can pinpoint them through searches and filters on LinkedIn. But I do think it's really important to validate that offer before you put it out to the world. Now, I'm not saying that it's got to be slow. That can happen quickly. But I think that's the bit that I had been missing, and that's the bit that you brought up. Even though I had it in my background, you brought it to the fore.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I want to skip over to LinkedIn, because it is one of the go-to strategies that you use. And, I think a lot of people are recognizing that LinkedIn is a very valuable platform, and they're lost over on LinkedIn. They're like, what are we supposed to be doing? Things are always changing. What I was doing for a while isn't working anymore. Is it possible to really develop quality connections and leads in our niches through leveraging LinkedIn?
Yeah, no, I think I think the most important thing is not the cart before the horse, right? So I think if you actually niche down, you have your profile that looks great, that's going to make it so much easier for you when you do reach out to people. Because, we all sort of follow a similar habit. Someone sends you a connection request, you go, oh my God, this could be another person pitching to me. So you'll go and look at it. And the first thing you'll do is go and look at their profile and you look at their content, right? And if someone, as we said before, profile, it's like bang, spot on. Yes, this person's actually talking my language. But the other thing is they go to your posts and they see that you're actually posting really valuable content, that you're getting lots of engagement on that content. They're like, okay, well, this person, might not be just someone that's looking to spam me. They actually are an authority in this particular topic, and I'm a little more interested. So I think that's the real power of having the profile and the posting work together. And then it makes it easier when you do outreach. Now, what we do recommend these days is that, it is a hybrid. So, i.e., it's using email, it's using maybe phone. That's right. We can still phone customers. I think we forget about that. Using SMS and also LinkedIn messages. So it's a combination of touch points these days. I think just doing LinkedIn outreach. So, for example, before we actually do reach out to someone, we pre-engage. So we make sure that, we're on their radar by looking at their content, commenting, engaging on their content. Then we actually send an email saying that we're going to send a connection request. So it doesn't just randomly appear. So there's that element. Then we send the connection request, we thank them, and then we send a personalized message. So that's very different to a lot of the messages received, which is, I don't know what you do. I've got this product to sell you. Would you like to buy it?
Okay. I'm glad we're talking about LinkedIn. I got to say a couple things about LinkedIn while we're here, because I actually avoided LinkedIn for a long time because I felt like it had become such a spammy place. And you were mentioning that. But thanks to you, and I have to give you full credit for this, you kind of woke me back up to the value of LinkedIn. So when you were talking about it, I'm like, all right, maybe I've been a little too stubborn here. And so here's I love LinkedIn for what can happen there, but let me just give you a couple of things to not do. Really follow Paul's process that he just laid out. Because when you're reaching out to people who are your ideal clients in your niche or other influencers that you want to collaborate with, the worst thing you can do is just like send them a connection request with nothing else. Like, I actually ignore them unless I actually know the person. I ignore them, and usually I delete them. So it's super important to kind of have some kind of connection. And secondly, do not pitch a podcaster in the first message.
Yes.
And we just let's just make this point come home because I know you get them too, Paul. Yeah. Bad idea, really bad idea. It's not going to get you on their podcast. I don't know. You want to say anything about that one, Paul?
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And, for some podcasts, it might be a 3-month or a 6-month journey. Like I'll always listen to someone's podcast before I ever get me and my team to engage on them. But I'll, if I pick up something that's great, I'll certainly, let them know that. If there's something that I think could be improved, because I don't always listen to my own podcast, and I didn't realize I had a date stamp on some of my videos until someone reached out and told me, right? So I'm always giving helpful tips to them. And, if you do, then, so you're building that credibility up. And it's the classic, you always want to deposit before you withdraw in someone's emotional bank account. So, they're humans. And it's good to know, is it going through an agency? How do they do it? So how do they look for guests? Asking questions like that before pitching is going to get you in a much better space. But humans are humans. We'd love to be treated. I always say, just treat people how you like to be treated. You'll go the right way. And, you don't like to be pitched to. So, it works exact same way for podcasters. We don't love to be pitched to unless, you've given us a bit of courtesy.
Yeah. Just nurture it a little bit first. That's all I
Yeah.
ask, my friends. That's all I ask. Show that you appreciate the work of the podcast before you try and get on it.
Yeah, and the other thing is do some homework, right? So,
Totally.
if you've got a specific topic and you know that they haven't had that on, are they looking for that topic? Is that something that their audience is interested in? So, the more helpful you can be, the easier it is for their job, or easier that it makes our job as a podcaster.
Absolutely. Paul, you brought this up earlier, and I think now's a great time to share one of your resources. You were talking about how important it is to really identify your ideal client as part of this niching process. If somebody is in that stage and they're looking for the best way to really get clear on their ideal client, what's the best resource you have for them?
Yeah, so we've developed a template on the ideal client. So if you go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/ICP, it's there. And I've got to say that it's not just my experience alone. So yes, I've got a lot of people from the Coke company that I've taken from that. Yes, some of my own experience, but I've worked with people like yourself, Melanie, where you gave me some tips. I've worked with guys like 𝐊𝐞𝐲 𝐓𝐚𝐤𝐿, where he gave me certain tips. So it's a culmination of my really my 28 years into a template. And just the one thing that I think is super powerful that a lot of people forget is who goes before you and who goes after you. And what do I mean by that? So a quick example. So I had someone selling a software, and they're like, I'm really difficult. I'm finding it difficult to get leads. And I said, well, who goes before you? And we ended up realizing that private equity firms, right? So they'll go in and they'll invest in a company because they were selling a finance software, and they ended up being a perfect partner. So you may have seen lots of ideal client templates before, but I think this one, where it's unique, is that it's got that who goes before and who goes after you, which can be brilliant referral partners or affiliate partners for you, because a one-to-many sale, to me, I'll always take over a one-to-one sale.
I love that. No, it's a really great system. I will link this up in the show notes, but again, it's paulhigginsmentoring.com/ICP. Paul, this is I love talking to you about all this stuff, but this is my favorite part of the episode because I love asking the more personal questions and letting people get to know you a little bit more, what your journey's been like to becoming the business owner and the success that you are today. What would you say is the boldest thing you've had to do up to now to get where you are right at this point in your journey?
Yeah, I think leaving directorship at Coca-Cola, it's something that I'd always aspired to. My dad worked there, which actually made it harder for me to work there. But, just to see dad, well, for dad to see me reach that level, he was incredibly proud. And then we were picking olives one day on his farm, and I said, I'm going to leave. And he's like, what? Like, isn't this what you've always dreamt of? And I'm like, no, Dad, I've always dreamt of protecting my family. And with my inherited condition, I don't believe that corporate is going to be the best place for me to be in. So that was probably the boldest decision I made. All of my friends at the time thought I was bat crazy. And it's funny now, unfortunately, with the way that COVID and everything's turned out, everyone's coming to me and saying, hey, you've been working in your track pants for 10 years. How do I do that? How do I work from home? How do I run my own business? How do I take control? So it was really bold back in 2011 to do it, but it turned out to be the best decision I've ever made.
Little did you know you were going to be a trailblazer 10 years later, right?
Yeah, well, they do say it takes 10 years
That's
to
right.
be an overnight success.
Exactly. What's one thing you wish you would have done sooner?
I think get a mentor that was where I wanted to go, right? So I've always had mentors, which is fantastic. But, sometimes I'll pick people that have been highly intelligent, but may not have the experience that I was about to go through. So, that's why I want to, help cloud partners, because it's the experience I've been through. I can live it firsthand. So I wish I had have done that sooner rather than taking, people that were highly intelligent, but they weren't always people that had domain or, niche experience like I'm talking about now.
Yeah, well said, well said. And, I think everybody it takes them a while sometimes to find that great mentor. And I know you make a great mentor for your ideal clients. And I've loved working with you as well. So thank you. And I want to really challenge you as you're listening in today. I want you to look at your niche. And I want you to ask yourself, if somebody read your LinkedIn profile or they went to your website, do they get who you specialize in or what you specialize in 3 minutes or less, or 3 seconds or less? Because literally it's that first glance where people get it. And if not, you want to make sure you're downloading Paul's resource, get yourself a coach or a mentor, find someone to help you really pull that out of you because it's probably in your blind spot. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to spotlight you and dig into this conversation around niching a little bit more.
Yeah, and thank you for really putting that sunshine back in my life. It was a little clouded when I first met you, but now it's bright and sunny. And I really appreciate you having me on the show today, but also everything you've done for me behind the scenes as well.
You are so welcome. Makes my day, makes my year to hear the sunshine is back in your life. Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. Be sure to join us right now in the Amplify Your Authority community at authorityamplifiers.com, and I'll share my 7 proven tips to be a highly paid expert that stands out in a crowded market. Plus, we're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.